Adam, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The time is 6:31 p.m. and the Louisville Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of March 3rd, 2015 is now called to order, and there is a quorum present. First item is to approve the minutes of the February 17th, 2015 meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, may I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Stephen,
Second.
seconded by Brent. Those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item 3 is a public hearing for consent agenda for a plat. This is the final plat of Louisville Town Crossing Edition. It's lots 9R-1, 9R-2, 9R-3, Block A. It's being a replat of the Louisville Town Crossing Edition. This is a 3.6104 acre tract. It's designated light industrial. It's located on the northeast quadrant of Windhaven Parkway and Josie Lane in Castle Hills. Mary?
Good evening, Commissioners. The plat for your consideration tonight, there are no variances requested, and staff would recommend approval.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, questions? All right, if not, I'll open up the public hearing at this time. If anyone wishes to step forward, comment on this, please do so. Sign in and state your name. Having no one come forward, the public hearing is now closed. Commissioners, comments?
No.
All right, may I have a motion, please?
Move to approve.
A second.
Motion by Brandon, seconded by Kristen. Those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 4 is public hearing for amendment to the Code of Ordinances. This is consideration of a proposed ordinance amending the Louisville City Code sections 6-54, 17-3, and 17-35, adding a new section 6-77, creating a process for compliance for properties impacted by the I-35 widening project, redefining certain terms relating to nonconformity, and modifying Board of Adjustment Authority and membership requirements.
Good evening, Commissioners. First and foremost, I think we have all met our new town manager, Richard Woodkey. We're glad to have him. He and Mary will be the primary support for this board. Of course, I'm always available anytime you need me to be at this meeting. So tonight we want to talk about the I-35E corridor and managing construction during the managing private construction during the public construction of the highway, basically.
Okay.
We have been inundated by a lot of applicants, existing businesses on the highway that are impacted by the right-of-way, so we felt like in order to implement the I-35 plan, we should come up with some kind of an interim process to help these businesses. So primary purpose of this ordinance is truly to help businesses and retain the businesses in Louisville. So the council adopted the I-35E redevelopment plan, and the redevelopment plan provides staff with a tool to communicate the vision to the citizens and to the developers and property owners. We have 2 implementation strategies. The first implementation strategy is a short-term strategy, which is the ordinance that's before you tonight. We also have a long-term strategy, which is actually providing an overlay district for I-35, which we are working right now with the selection of a consultant. That's going to be a long-range plan, and it's going to take probably about a year to develop and implement. So you will be involved in that process, and you will be seeing that plan coming before you soon. Why do we need to consider a property impact ordinance at this time ahead of the corridor overlay district? Primarily, it's because TxDOT is out there acquiring right-of-way. Anytime TxDOT acquires right-of-way, it makes properties adjacent to the highway non-conforming. So we need to come up with how we are going to address those non-conformities, which ones are really significant, which ones are not significant, and we can basically work with the property owner and make the process easy for them. The impacts that the right-of-way acquisition is having right now is on access driveways, deceleration lane, landscaping, parking, some of it is going through building structures, signage, water and sewer services, drainage. So there's a whole list of items that this right-of-way acquisition is impacting the property owners. Our current ordinance in place is basically saying if anything changes on the site, you need to come in and comply with our engineering site plan requirements and meet the current ordinances. So you have to provide a plat for the property. You have to show that the building, parking lot, utilities, drainage, everything is in compliance with the current ordinances. And so it's normally a very long process. It's kind of an expensive process because you have to hire an engineer to provide this plan for you. And it's a little onerous on a property owner that has only lost a few parking spaces. So we wanted to create a separate process for those that have been impacted, but very lightly, so they could basically continue operation and move on their way. This is, again, the current engineering site plan. The way it works is that it's for any construction of a new non-single family development or any change in square footage of an enclosed building or parking area. So the only exception we have right now in the ordinance, if you are expanding your building 10% or 5,000 square feet, whichever is less, then you don't have to go through the process. But anything else that affects the site itself, you have to go through the process of engineering site plan. And when that happens, basically properties will have to meet all current codes. So if the engineering site plan is triggered, then you're going to have to meet all the code requirements. So if your building doesn't meet the masonry requirements at that time, you either need to meet the requirement or get a variance from the city council. Again, it just becomes a much longer process. So we felt like the most efficient and effective way to achieve compliance during the I-35 construction is to provide a very clear and reasonable time frame for compliance. That's the reason we are proposing the I-35 impact ordinance to better serve the businesses. What this ordinance applies to is developed property along I-35. So it has to be a developed property. If you have a vacant piece of land and you want to build something on it and it's on I-35 right now, you comply with the regulations that we have in place. This is for someone that already has a building on I-35. It does not apply to any single-family residences, and they can continue as they are. Even if they deem substandard, we're not going to consider them substandard. So we have some single-family housing along I-35. They're actually zoned general business, I think, some of them, but there are people living in the structure, in these houses. So we are not going to impact those residences at all. We're going to leave that alone, pretty much. And of course, vacant land, they have to meet the requirements of the current ordinance. And if a property has been vacant for more than 12 months, so basically there is no use within that structure, then they will have to come and comply with the current ordinances. We have categorized two impacts within this ordinance. One is a minor impact and one is a major impact. A minor impact will enjoy greater flexibility and streamline approval process. Actually, we hope to approve all the minor impacts through the staff process and not have to go to any of the boards for processing. Major impacts must go meet the engineering site plan requirement and go to city council if they cannot meet all of the requirements, and they have to get a variance from the city council. The minor impact sites basically means a site that has been impacted by I-35 right-of-way taking to the extent that the viability and functionality of the building is still fine. It's existing, it can function, and it's not going to have a major impact on the functionality of that use. So which means like a loss of parking. A lot of them are going to lose their parking and landscaping. So pretty much if they are losing just their parking and landscaping, they can submit a modified site plan to us for that particular, just the area of the take. And if it's less than 15% of the required code at the time that building or that property was developed. So basically, we look at the latest engineering site plan that was approved for that property, and if the property is impacted less than 15%, staff can approve it, we'll send them on their way, and we consider them conforming, and they can be on their way and just doing their business as normal. And We also look at minimal changes to utilities, drainage, driveways. If we can take care of them through staff level, we'll go ahead and do that so they won't have to go through a long approval process. Once they have submitted a minor impact site plan, and we have a list of items that needs to be provided on that minor site plan, which is a lot less than what our engineering site plan requires, then the property owner have 60 days to comply with those requirements, and then they're basically done. The property must be platted. So if the property is not platted, that's one thing that they need to come in and comply with and plat the property. The major impact sites are the ones that have been impacted basically more than 15%. So if you are impacted more than 15% of your parking and your landscaping, that means the right-of-way take is well into your property. So at that time, that means that your building may be impacted, your fire lane may be impacted, your fire protection system may be impacted. There's a lot of areas that once you go move beyond 15% that we need to look at. So then they come under what we call a major impact, and the major impact basically says you have to submit an engineering site plan. So the engineering site plan that we have now in requirements for everybody in the general development ordinance has to be complied with. If one of these impacts creates an unsafe condition at the time of taking, so let's say they've taken, we've had some of these issues. If you remember, like they took part of some of the old hotels. And when TxDOT comes in, they take that piece, basically, demolish the piece that TxDOT took. The remainder piece was sitting there for almost 2 or 3 months. Like half of the building was sitting there completely open. That's an unsafe condition. We cannot allow anybody to operate out of that condition. So if an unsafe condition is created, we're going to have to shut them down. They have to come in and apply for an engineering site plan. Once their site plan is approved, they have to make the modification, and then they can occupy the site again. But in the meantime, we're not going to recommend allowing any unsafe condition happening on the property. Some of the properties have been fully acquired by TxDOT. Basically, that means that TxDOT has impacted their functionality enough that even though the building may not have been impacted, they have purchased the entire site. Basically, the property owner has been fully compensated for the entire project. So if we have those sites, we're going to consider them as a major impact site, and they need to come in and apply for a full engineering site plan so we know how the building is going to function in the future. A very good example is a 3-story building at Corporate and I-35. It's called the Brook Hollow offices. DCTA offices used to be in there. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with that building. That building was a complete take, even though the building is standing. But TxDOT took enough right-of-way that really impacted their driveway, their, of course, parking and landscaping, and they couldn't function. So they have completely vacated that building. So all the tenants have moved out of that building, and that building is vacant. Now, that building can be occupied probably later with a different use or a use that doesn't need as much parking, or they could come in and show us where the new driveway is going to be, how can they function, how can they rearrange their fire lane. And if they come in and file an engineering site plan and all of those issues are taken care of, then they can occupy the building again. So necessarily, a full take doesn't mean that they have to take the building down. If they come in and through engineering site plan review, it's determined that this site cannot function and it cannot be occupied, then we have to go to Plan B, or the property owner needs to determine what they want to do with that building, basically. So the process for a major impact application is within 60 days, we're either going to send a notice, especially on the sites that we have notification that property was acquired and that property impacted more than 16% of the site development. We will send them a notice to the property owner and basically letting them know that your site has been a major impact site and you need to come in and file an application. Again, we don't have to send, if a building is not impacted, because some of these takes are for phase 2 and some of them are for phase 1. Phase 1 is the phase that's under construction now. Phase 2, TxDOT is buying right-of-way, but they're not going to use them for a very, very long time. So the property has been taken or acquired, but nothing changes on site. When you drive by, you don't see any changes. So if that's the case, that means that, we're not going to press to bring those sites that have not been changed into compliance. Our major concerns are the sites that are not functioning, basically, either unsafe or not functioning in accordance to some city codes and regulations. So when we send that notification, they have 60 days to come in and file for an engineering site plan and show the deficiencies and how they are going to address those deficiencies. Some of the notes we like to make that if for an exterior finish, basically when we have a requirement for an exterior finish, where buildings are physically changed, as if the right-of-way take has actually impacted the building itself, then all the exterior material finishes must comply with our current code requirements. Signs are the same thing. If the sign is taken, so if the sign has to be relocated somewhere else, they must comply with current ordinance requirements. So if the sign was too big and it was permitted 25 years ago, and now we have a different requirement in place, if they are removing the sign, because TxDOT pays them for that sign, basically, and pays for the relocation of it. But when they come in to relocate it, they'll have to comply with the new ordinance regulations. Again, I want to reiterate for enforcement and compliance, if the site is unsafe, it's deemed unsafe for occupancy, they need to basically shut down, and we start enforcement within 6 months. So they have a 6-month window to come in and comply with the ordinances, but they have to start submitting their engineering site plan or modified engineering site plan within that 6 months period. After approval is obtained, then they have 12 months to comply with that approved site plan. So if they need to redo their landscaping or they're going to move their parking somewhere else, they have 12 months to make those changes. For if it's a major impact site, and 6 months for a minor impact site. Again, remember, a minor impact site is primarily a site that has not had that much changes on it. So we felt like 6 months is adequate time for them to put back landscaping, to repave their parking, to do those minor drainage issues, minor driveway issues. If they're showing us that, we can grant one extension of another 6 months if we feel like the property owner is working in good faith with the city. But after denial, if their engineering site plan comes in, they can't comply with certain things, they have gone through their due process, council has denied certain requirements or has denied that engineering site plan, then after that, they need to actually bring those deficiencies into compliance, or we're going to start code compliance on them within 3 months. We wanted to show you some examples of minor impact. So some of these, I don't know if it shows up very well. The right-of-way take is extremely minor, and it's not going to change the configuration of the building. This is a much better example. So the green line is the take, the red line is the existing right-of-way. So as you can see, that's pretty much cuts a little into the parking, a little into the landscaping, and it's not going to impact the operation of these uses. These are the ones that we really want to preserve and make sure that they're not having to go through a long, drawn-out process, that we could basically give them a letter, look at their site plan, and say, you are fine, you can continue operating your business. This is another example of the take, where again, the red line is the right-of-way and the green line is the take. So the take is extremely small as those two little corners, and those are something we can deal with. Again, another example of minor impact. Now, this is an example of a major impact, where the take is actually running in the middle of the building. So this example is actually, I don't know if one of them is Abuelos or not. I can't tell. Is it Abuelos and Frankie's? Yeah. So basically, those restaurants that are at the Lake Point shopping center, all the frontage of those pad sites, the buildings are going to be in the take. And these property owners are going to be fully compensated for taking the entire site. So these sites really need to come in and show us, like, like an Abuelo, I don't know how they're going to, or Frankie's, I don't know how they're going to operate after the right-of-way is taken. Which means that basically those properties are going to be vacated. We have a potential for redevelopment. So again, remember that what this is going to create anytime we have, when the right-of-way take is so deep that the businesses would go away, this is our opportunity for redevelopment, and that's what we're trying to do. We are working with every business along the corridor to find another location for them to relocate in Louisville, or try to see if we could work with them for a new structure on their remainder of the site. So that's something we'll definitely be tackling throughout the construction process. Again, this is another major impact site. This, I think, is the Brook Hollow building that I was mentioning to you. So if you can see the green line is way deep into their parking lot. And even though the building is not impacted, the operation of that building is impacted, because the type of uses that they had in this building couldn't operate without the number of parking that was there. So in order for this site to be occupied, they need to come back, file an engineering site plan, show us how they're going to address the deficiencies, what kind of uses are going to the building. The option may be like one of the floors would be, no users on one of the floors, so we can meet the parking requirements. But the primary issue with this site is their access is taken. So their driveway on I-35 has gone away, so they need to think about another driveway of how to access their site. Now, they can work with some of the adjacent property owners, and if they can create that, we'll definitely work with them. But the idea is that this site will come in through a full engineering site plan process. Another major impact site is, again, showing the right-of-way line is going to be very close to the building. Another example. So primarily, again, this is the purpose of the ordinance is to work with the businesses and property owners to come up with a plan that for the minor changes, we can give them a quick answer. And for the major changes, we have a process to actually help them either relocate to another location or help them redevelop on that same site. The next phase, which is going to be the corridor overlay ordinance, will probably replace this ordinance. But since we're going to have about a year or a year and a half before that ordinance is adopted, we needed something in the interim to work with these issues. It's kind of, it's a long ordinance. As you notice, we put a copy of the strike through so you know what we're changing. But truly, it's very simple. The whole idea behind it is to create a simplified process for the businesses to be viable on I-35. We have some minor changes in the zoning ordinance. That's one of the primary reasons that this ordinance is before you. But those are all cleanup items. Some of these non-conforming uses will have to go before the Zoning Board of Adjustment in order to, if they are asking for variances, certain variances has to go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And we made some clarification on those items. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer questions.
So is there an intent to have all of them in compliance by the end of this phase one construction?
All of the properties in compliance? I'd say probably not, because again, some of them are not going to lose functionality. So which means that we're not going to see them coming through the process. When they will really be an impact, or what you will really see a different I-35 is when we put that overlay district in place, which develops a new set of guidelines that then we would provide a time frame for everybody to comply with those guidelines. So then you will see a lot of changes.
Help me understand the three-story building that had the law firms.
Right.
So the state bought the building and the
Yes.
land? So then who rents it out to other people? You said it could be rented if they didn't use proper.
Yeah, that's the interesting, it's a very complicated issue with TxDOT. So TxDOT must pay, when they take right-of-way, they must pay damages to the remainder. If a property owner can prove that by this right-of-way taking or this right-of-way acquisition, there's damages to the remainder, and that basically their site is just not functional anymore, TxDOT must buy the entire site. it's a process that they go through. It's like an arbitration process. Once that determination is made, though, TxDOT by law can only use the portion that's needed for the right-of-way. Even though they have acquired the whole property, by law, they cannot use it. They must only use the portion that's needed for the construction, which means they basically turn around and give the remainder back to the property owner. So the property owner ends up, I mean, that's the law, and for, I don't know, fortunately for the property owner, unfortunately for taxpayers and TxDOT, that the property owner ends up with the full value of their property acquired, plus the remainder of the property.
Okay.
But that's the way it is.
All right, thank you.
That's the building where the DCTA was,
Correct.
correct? And Jack Matthews. Okay.
Yeah, Jack Matthews was. So basically, so DCTA has relocated to another site. Jack Matthews, which is he's a large developer in the area. He's relocated to Old Town. We're glad to have him in Old Town.
Then one other question. Any property that's on the side streets, like corporate or anything, that's impacted,
Not on the side streets, because pretty much it's on the frontage.
just facing?
Facing the road. And again, at this point, we really wanted to deal with the properties that are on the frontage, that are truly impacted by the right-of-way. With the corridor ordinance, and I'm glad you brought that up, Chairman Davis, that when we look at the overlay district, we are going to go beyond that, because it's not just the little strip that's impacted on the I-35 we want to redevelop. We want to have opportunity to redevelop, a tier behind it as well, so.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First of all, I'm assuming every property is going to need to be replatted because they're all different. So does that mean that all of those plats are going to come to P and Z, or
Yes.
does it bypass P and Z?
They're all
Even the
gonna come to
minor
P&Z.
ones?
Unless if we call them a minor plat can be approved by staff. We already have that in the ordinance. But
Okay.
depending on if we can call them a minor plat or not. Remember, if they are already platted, just because a piece of right-of-way is taken from them, technically that plat is no longer the original plat, but we're not going to require those guys to come and plat. This only applies if a property is not platted. It's never been platted.
Okay, so they don't have to replat.
Right. If they want to voluntarily come and replat, let's say, for refinancing purposes, a lot of title companies don't accept a plat that's not in compliance with the original
Right.
plat, then that's their prerogative. We're not going to force them through that
Okay.
process.
Okay, and then my second question was, for the property owners that have a major impact, that they could still use their property, but they need to make some modifications to get into compliance, is there a way that we could kind of expedite theirs to, I understand why we would expedite the minor ones as well, but that with the guys that are really impacted, it's affecting their business, if we could make those a priority to push through the system
We
quickly.
do. We truly try to expedite any project along I-35. So to make sure if they are in an area where they are majorly impacted, but at the same time they are a viable business that are operating on I-35, we'll do our best to get them through the process as quickly as possible. We do that right now.
Quick question. Do we know how many of the businesses that are going to have a major impact that have closed, like the Frankie's that's going to close and Mimi's?
We have that. I just don't have it in front of me,
Okay.
but we certainly can provide it. There are 144 properties that are impacted. Out of those, I don't know how many of them are mine. I mean, we have a spreadsheet on it, but I don't have it in front of me right now.
And do we know, I know you don't know the specific numbers, but of those businesses, how many are we going to find another place for them within Louisville?
We do, that's what we do on a daily basis in my shop. So we actually have a map. We have quite a few of them. I think there are only maybe one or two that have not found a home in Louisville. Everybody else has found a place in Louisville. A perfect example is Saltgrass. Saltgrass has relocated, one block off at 121 Toll, basically, and we have. It's very interesting. We also have some new businesses that they don't care that the highway is under construction. They feel like this is a great location to be. I'm going to have new operations. We have some new restaurants that are coming up on I-35 that they're just going to start operating during the construction phase. Now, Abuelos is one of those that's going to operate until the day that they actually take the building, which we are glad, because I'm certainly glad. That's one of my favorite restaurants. I go there a lot. But We have not found a site for them yet, or they haven't committed to a site yet, because they already have a site in the new development in the Colony, the Nebraska Furniture Mart. So, but once the highway, they have told us, once the highway construction is complete, they will come back and start looking at a new site in Louisville. But we have had quite a few of them that have relocated in other places. Pier 1 is, I'm sorry, that's another,
Sorry.
Pier 1 is a large one that actually just relocated to 3040. So,
I have one more question. So there's a short-term plan and a long-range plan. So for the properties that have the major impact and they're going to have to go through this more lengthy process, the guidelines that they're going to be given to follow, I'm assuming those are going to be in compliance with the long-range plan as well, or are they going to have to come back and do this again?
yeah, they'll probably have to, because we haven't developed those criteria for the long-range plan, that's part of the corridor overlay district, they will probably have to come back at some point, but there is a triggering mechanism. So let's say they want to expand, or they want to do something different, to their building, or they want to change their use. That becomes a triggering mechanism that they have to come back and comply with the overlay district. Now, in order to expedite achieving that vision, we're also going to put in place a lot of incentives. So even if there is no trigger, just by having a virtue of having an incentive in place, that if you come in and comply with certain requirements of the overlay district, then the city will do A, B, and C. So we're hoping to bring them back into compliance with the overlay district, the long-range plan, through more of an incentive process versus an enforcement process.
Okay.
Questions? Anyone else? All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
This time we'll open up the public hearing. If anyone wishes to step forward and talk about this subject, please do so at this time. All right, having no one come forward, the public hearing is now closed. Commissioners, comments, concerns, questions? Final? All right, may I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Kristen, seconded by Brandon. Those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
Motion by Brandon,
Second.
seconded by Brent. Those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Meeting adjourned.